January 1944. Before sunrise, the Pacific is already alive with noise. Naval guns thunder from far offshore, their flashes briefly lighting the clouds. The sea heaves under hundreds of landing craft, pushing toward a thin, hostile shoreline. Salt spray coats steel ramps. Diesel fumes hang in the air. Inside one boat, Marines sit shoulder to shoulder, helmets forward, rifles braced between knees. No speeches, no prayers spoken aloud. Each man listens to the engine and the rising crack of incoming fire. They know the bombardment has not broken the island. It never does. The ramp slams down. Instantly, the beach erupts. Hidden machine guns rake the surf. Mortar rounds burst among the waves. Men stumble forward into waist-deep water, weighed down with gear, forced to keep moving as bodies fall around them. There is no cover, only open sand, shattered coral, and the black mouths of bunkers staring back from the ridgeline. This is not a single battle. It is the beginning of a systematic fight to erase a fortress built to survive everything except what is coming next. By early 1944, the Pacific War had entered a new phase. The initial shock of Japanese expansion, Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Wake Island, was over. The balance had begun to shift. After brutal, costly battles at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and New Guinea, American commanders no longer asked whether the Japanese island defenses could be breached, but how much it would cost to do so. The strategy was clear. It was called island hopping. Rather than assault every Japanese-held position, the United States would seize key islands, build airfields and naval bases, and cut off enemy garrisons left to wither in isolation. Each landing was a calculated step westward, toward the Philippines, toward Okinawa, and ultimately toward Japan itself. At the center of this approach stood the United States Marine Corps. The Marines were no longer an experimental force. They had become specialists in amphibious warfare, trained, reorganized, and bloodied by failure and success alike. Every beach assault since 1942 had rewritten doctrine. Every casualty report had reshaped planning. Across the water, the defenders belonged primarily to the Imperial Japanese Army, supported by naval units where available. But by 1944, Japanese strategy had also evolved. No longer focused on defending beaches at all costs, Japanese commanders began constructing layered defensive systems inland. Concrete bunkers were carved into hillsides. Artillery pieces were hidden in caves with narrow firing slits. Interlocking fields of fire overlapped beaches, ravines, and likely avenues of advance. The goal was not to repel the landing outright, but to destroy the attacker slowly, grinding them down with every yard gained. This philosophy had been tested before. At Tarawa in November 1943, Marines learned what happened when a stronghold survived naval bombardment. Japanese bunkers endured days of shelling, then opened fire once landing craft were committed. Casualties shocked the American public. Commanders took note. Lessons were extracted in blood. By January 1944, U.S. planning had become more deliberate and more ruthless. Naval gunfire would be heavier, airstrikes would be sustained, and once Marines landed, the battle would not be rushed. The island in question, small on maps but massive in consequence, sat astride vital sea lanes. Its airfields threatened Allied shipping and bomber routes. As long as it remained in Japanese hands, further advances would be exposed. Intelligence reports painted a grim picture. Thousands of defenders, months of preparation, positions reinforced with steel, concrete, and natural rock. A stronghold designed not to fall quickly. For the Marines preparing offshore, this was no abstraction.
Training rehearsals had drilled the sequence into muscle memory. Landing waves, follow-on echelons, flamethrower teams, demolitions units, tank infantry coordination. Each role existed for a reason. Each failure would be punished immediately. Because once the first wave hit the sand, the battle would no longer belong to planners or admirals. It would belong to the men advancing toward the stronghold, step by step, bunker by bunker, into a system built specifically to kill them. And that system was waiting.
Behind the assault force stood the full weight of American industrial warfare. By 1944, the United States Navy had achieved near-total dominance across large sections of the Pacific. Aircraft carriers roamed freely. Battleships and cruisers were assigned not just to sea control, but to a new role, mobile artillery platforms meant to pulverize island defenses before Marines ever set foot ashore. Yet experience had already exposed a hard truth. Naval bombardment alone could not destroy what could not be seen. Japanese engineers had learned to disappear into the terrain. Instead of tall, visible fortifications, they built low, reinforced structures masked by rock and vegetation. Gun positions were angled sideways to avoid direct hits. Cave systems ran deep into hills, connecting command posts, ammunition stores, and medical stations. Some tunnels extended hundreds of meters, allowing defenders to vanish under fire and reappear somewhere else entirely. This was not desperation, it was adaptation. Japanese doctrine accepted that islands might eventually fall, but only after inflicting maximum casualties. Every Marine killed delayed the American advance. Every day of resistance strained Allied logistics and morale. Time itself became a weapon. To support this strategy, island garrisons were ordered to fight to the end. Withdrawal was rarely planned. Surrender was not considered. Supplies were stockpiled underground. Water cisterns were carved into stone. Medical care was minimal, but ammunition was prioritized. For American planners, this meant one thing: the fight would not end at the beach. The Marines would have to dismantle an underground fortress without maps, under fire, often without knowing where the next shot would come from. Standard infantry tactics, advance, suppress, flank, had to be modified for terrain where the enemy was invisible until he fired. This reality reshaped Marine units at the lowest level. Flamethrower operators were attached to rifle platoons. Demolition teams trained to place charges against cave mouths while under cover fire. Tanks were modified with extra armor and flame weapons, not to duel other tanks, but to neutralize bunkers at point-blank range. Coordination between infantry, armor, engineers, naval gunfire, and close air support became constant and immediate. Mistakes were fatal. A single overlooked firing slit could halt an entire advance. A hidden tunnel exit could allow defenders to attack from behind. A bunker assumed destroyed could reopen fire minutes later. Intelligence officers tried to predict defensive layouts using aerial photography and prisoner interrogations. But photographs could not see underground. Prisoners were rare, and Japanese positions were often rebuilt even after bombardment. As the invasion force assembled offshore, commanders understood that no amount of preparation would fully reveal what awaited them. The real map of the island would only be drawn during the assault itself, etched by fire, movement, and loss. The Marines knew this too. Many had already fought on earlier islands. They had seen bunkers survive direct hits. They had learned that silence did not mean safety. A quiet ridge could erupt without warning. A secured area could suddenly become a killing zone. And yet, the mission did not change. The island had to be taken.
The stronghold had to be broken. The path west had to remain open. When the final orders were issued, they were simple and brutal in their clarity. Land, advance inland, destroy all resistance, secure the island. No timelines were promised, no easy victories expected. Only certainty remained. That once the Marines moved off the beach, the battle would fragment into hundreds of small, violent encounters. Individual squads would fight their own wars inside ravines, among shattered rocks, and at the mouths of dark tunnels. It was here, within those confined spaces, that strategy gave way to survival, and doctrine was tested by human limits. And it is within those moments that the true angles of this battle begin to emerge.
For the Marines advancing inland, the battle quickly lost any sense of scale. There was no sweeping front line, no clear horizon of progress. Instead, the fight collapsed into yards and seconds, into individual decisions made under crushing pressure. Each Marine carried not only weapons and ammunition, but exhaustion, fear, and responsibility for the man beside him. The terrain amplified everything. Heat pressed down relentlessly. Volcanic soil tore at boots and hands. The smell of cordite, rotting vegetation, and burned flesh clung to the air. Sleep came in fragments, if at all. Leadership at this level was intimate. Squad leaders led from the front because they had no other choice. When an officer fell, someone else stepped forward, sometimes without rank, sometimes without hesitation. Orders were often reduced to gestures and shouts over gunfire. The Japanese defenders were rarely seen. A Marine might spend hours advancing under fire without ever glimpsing who was shooting. The psychological strain was constant. Silence could mean safety or the calm before an ambush. Yet cohesion held. Marines dragged wounded comrades out of fire. Medics crawled forward under bullets to reach the injured. Riflemen covered flamethrower operators, knowing they were prime targets. This was not heroism born of speeches. It was survival reinforced by training and loyalty. As days passed, casualty lists grew. Units rotated when possible, but momentum could not be lost. Every pause allowed defenders to reposition underground. Every delay gave the stronghold time to breathe. The men knew this, and so they moved again, forward into spaces measured not by maps, but by courage and fatigue, toward defenses that demanded a different kind of solution. From a tactical perspective, the stronghold was not a single position, it was a network. Japanese defenses were designed to function as a living system. Bunkers covered each other. Cave entrances were positioned to fire along natural choke points. Mortars were placed deep enough to survive bombardment, but close enough to support frontline fire. Early Marine assaults revealed the danger of attacking piecemeal. A bunker suppressed from the front could be reoccupied through tunnels. A ravine cleared at dawn could be reinfested by afternoon. Adaptation followed quickly. Marine units learned to isolate before destroying. Fire teams pinned visible positions while others maneuvered to seal escape routes. Engineers collapsed tunnel entrances. Flamethrowers were used not just to kill, but to deny space, to force defenders deeper underground where oxygen failed and movement became impossible. Naval gunfire and airstrikes were called in with increasing precision, often guided by forward observers operating just yards from enemy lines. Tanks advanced slowly, hugging infantry, their guns trained on firing slits and cave mouths. This was methodical warfare, measured, relentless. Each position was treated as a problem to be solved, not an obstacle to rush past. The goal was not speed, but permanence. Once an area was cleared, it had to remain clear.
The Japanese system, formidable as it was, had one weakness. It depended on fixed positions. Once isolated, defenders could not maneuver freely. Ammunition dwindled, water ran out, command and control fractured underground. The Marines exploited this systematically, tightening pressure until resistance collapsed, not everywhere at once, but in fragments. As this tactical grind continued, another dimension of the battle came into sharper focus, one defined not by movement or manpower, but by machines and fire.
Technology did not dominate this battlefield, but it decided outcomes. The Japanese stronghold had been designed to survive conventional firepower. Thin bunkers might crack under direct hits, but reinforced caves absorbed shock and sealed themselves behind rock and earth. To defeat them, Marines had to bring weapons meant for confined destruction. Flamethrowers became decisive tools, not as instruments of spectacle, but as controlled, tactical weapons. A brief burst into a cave entrance consumed oxygen, forced defenders outward, or rendered positions uninhabitable. Their psychological impact was as powerful as their physical effect. Demolition charges followed. Engineers crawled forward under cover, placing explosives at firing slits or tunnel mouths, sealing entire sections of the defensive network in seconds. Tanks advanced cautiously, acting as mobile shields and precision fire platforms, engaging targets often no more than a few meters away. These tools were not flawless. Flamethrower operators were targeted relentlessly. Tanks were vulnerable in narrow terrain. Demolition teams worked exposed and slow. But combined, infantry, armor, fire, and explosives, they formed a system that could dismantle the stronghold piece by piece. Technology here was not about superiority. It was about necessity. Leadership in this battle faced a unique challenge. Commanders could rarely see the battlefield they were controlling. Radio communication was unreliable. Terrain blocked signals. Units advanced independently, sometimes out of contact for hours. Company and battalion commanders relied on fragmentary reports, runner messages, and sound, listening for gunfire to judge progress. Decisions were often reactive. When one sector stalled, resources were shifted. When a breakthrough appeared, pressure intensified immediately. Flexibility mattered more than rigid planning. Junior leadership carried enormous weight. Sergeants and corporals made life-and-death choices without guidance, adjusting tactics on the spot. Higher command trusted this initiative because experience had proven it essential. This decentralized leadership allowed momentum to survive chaos. Even when plans unraveled, the overall direction held, forward, inward, and relentless. Inside the stronghold, the Japanese defenders experienced the battle differently. Cut off from reinforcement, buried underground, they fought within shrinking spaces. Air grew stale. Wounds went untreated. Communication broke down as tunnels collapsed or were sealed. Yet resistance persisted. Small groups continued firing long after positions were isolated. Counterattacks emerged unexpectedly from hidden exits. Some defenders waited in silence for hours, even days, before striking. This was not random defiance. It was doctrine executed to its final limit. But isolation eroded coordination. Once ammunition ran low and water disappeared, the fortress began to fail from within. Individual courage could not replace logistics. Determination could not reopen collapsed tunnels. The defenders' greatest strength, the underground network, became their confinement. For the Marines, destroying the stronghold carried a psychological weight that did not fade with victory.
close-range combat against unseen enemies left lasting impressions. The necessity of using fire and explosives in confined spaces blurred moral clarity, even when tactically justified. Yet hesitation meant death. The environment demanded action without reflection. By the time resistance visibly weakened, Marines understood something fundamental. This battle was not about heroics or swift conquest. It was about endurance, adaptation, and the grim mechanics of modern warfare. And as the last defensive pockets tightened, all of these angles, human, tactical, technological, and psychological, converged toward a single, unavoidable moment. The point where the stronghold would finally break.
The decisive phase does not arrive with a single explosion. It arrives quietly, when resistance begins to change shape. By the second week of fighting, the Marines can feel it. Gunfire no longer erupts from every ridge at once. Mortar rounds fall less frequently. The battlefield narrows, pulling inward toward a core of hardened positions that refuse to collapse. These are the heart of the stronghold. The remaining Japanese defenses are concentrated in the most difficult terrain, interlocking caves beneath steep slopes, bunkers shielded by rock thick enough to deflect anything short of a direct hit. Observation posts overlook every approach. Any careless movement is punished immediately. Marine commanders recognize the moment. This is no longer a broad assault, it is a reduction. Artillery fire shifts from saturation to precision. Naval guns target known cave complexes identified through days of hard contact. Aircraft strike narrow ridge lines with bombs timed to coincide with infantry movement. Every action is synchronized, not to advance quickly, but to apply pressure everywhere at once. On the ground, assault teams move with grim familiarity. Riflemen pin firing slits. Tanks edge forward until their barrels almost touch rock. Flamethrower operators wait for the signal. When fire is unleashed, it is brief and controlled. Cave mouths erupt in flame. Explosions collapse entrances. Smoke pours from openings that once returned steady gunfire. In some places, defenders emerge, disoriented and desperate. In others, silence follows and remains. Japanese counterattacks still occur, but they are smaller now, fragmented. A handful of soldiers emerge from concealed exits, charging with rifles or grenades, often knowing they will not return. These attacks slow advances, but cannot reverse them. The fortress is shrinking. Inside the tunnels, conditions deteriorate rapidly. Water sources are destroyed. Ammunition stocks are buried or burned. Communications between units cease as sections are sealed off one by one. Commanders lose control, not because they lack will, but because the environment no longer allows coordination. For the Marines, progress is measured in meters: a cleared bunker, a sealed tunnel, a ridge finally silent. Each success is followed immediately by the next task. There is no celebration, no pause. Experience has taught them that unfinished defenses can reawaken without warning. The turning point is not marked by flags or announcements. It is marked by absence. When an entire sector remains quiet after repeated probes, when tanks move without drawing fire, when forward observers report no response to bombardment. The stronghold has not surrendered, but it has lost its ability to function as a system. What remains is resistance without coordination, isolated pockets fighting alone, disconnected from the purpose that once unified them. And as Marine units push deeper into the final defensive core, the battle reaches the moment where destruction becomes inevitable rather than contested. The final phase unfolds without spectacle. There is no single breakthrough, no dramatic collapse of lines. Instead, the stronghold dies slowly. Marine units advance into zones that were once lethal, now reduced to echoes and drifting smoke. The ground is torn open by shell fire. Rock faces are blackened. Cave entrances, some natural, others blasted open by explosives, dot the slopes like wounds that refuse to close. The remaining defenders fight from instinct rather than command. Some hold isolated chambers deep underground, emerging only when Marines pass close enough to attack. Others wait in silence, conserving ammunition, hoping for a moment that never truly arrives. These encounters are abrupt and violent. A sudden burst of rifle fire from a side tunnel, a grenade tossed from darkness, a brief, desperate charge that ends within seconds. Marine response is immediate and practiced. Fire teams react without hesitation. Flamethrowers are brought forward. Engineers seal openings with explosives. Each engagement is swift, controlled, and final. The Japanese defensive doctrine, designed to inflict maximum casualties, has reached its limit. Without coordination, without supply, without the ability to maneuver, resistance becomes localized and futile. Courage remains, organization does not. By now, the Marines understand the pattern. They do not rush, they do not assume. Every position is treated as occupied until proven otherwise. Tanks advance cautiously, guns trained on shadowed openings. Infantry clears ground inch by inch, marking sealed tunnels and destroyed bunkers to prevent reemergence. The battlefield grows quieter, but not peaceful. Smoke hangs low over the terrain. The air is heavy with ash and dust. The silence that follows each cleared sector is tense, watched closely, tested repeatedly. Only after hours without movement does the advance resume. Some defenders refuse isolation. In the final days, small groups attempt coordinated counterattacks, striking at night or during rain squalls when visibility drops. These attacks are fierce but brief. Marines repel them with flares, automatic fire, and pre-registered artillery strikes. Each failed effort further weakens what remains. Command posts, once buried deep and protected, are uncovered or destroyed. Maps and documents are found abandoned in collapsed chambers. Radios lie silent, crushed under rubble. The Stronghold's nervous system is gone. The last resistance concentrates in terrain that offers natural protection. Steep ravines, thick rock formations, and the deepest cave systems. These are cleared deliberately, often at great risk. Marines crawl forward under cover, placing charges by hand. Tanks fire at point-blank range. Flamethrowers reduce chambers to suffocating heat and darkness. There is no confusion now about what this battle has become. It is not maneuver warfare. It is not a contest of tactics. It is eradication. By the time the final positions fall, the island is effectively silent. Not because every defender has been found, but because organized resistance no longer exists. What remains are isolated survivors without ammunition, without water, without a way to influence the battle's outcome. Marine units establish perimeter security. Engineers inspect cleared areas. Medics tend to the wounded. For the first time since landing, movement occurs without incoming fire. The Stronghold, once a living, interconnected fortress, has been reduced to shattered rock, sealed tunnels, and scorched earth. Victory is not announced. It is recognized. Commanders confirm objectives secured. Flares rise. Reports move up the chain. Offshore, ships adjust formation. Aircraft divert to new targets farther west.
The island has changed hands. But the cost is written everywhere, on the ground, in the casualty lists, and in the faces of men who have spent days fighting an enemy they could rarely see. As the Marines consolidate their hold, the battle's meaning begins to shift. No longer about survival or destruction, it becomes about consequence. What this victory has achieved, what it has cost, and how it will shape every assault still to come.
When the fighting ends, the island does not feel conquered. It feels emptied. The silence that settles over the battlefield is uneven and unsettling, broken by distant demolitions, the scrape of shovels, the low voices of Marines moving cautiously through terrain that had tried to kill them only hours earlier. Smoke still rises from shattered ridges. The ground is scarred beyond recognition. Engineers begin their work immediately. Every cave must be inspected. Every bunker must be sealed or destroyed. Experience has taught the Marines that the end of organized resistance does not always mean the end of danger. Isolated defenders may still be alive underground, wounded but armed, waiting. Bodies are recovered where possible. Many are not. Casualty figures move quietly through command posts, killed, wounded, missing. Units that landed together are now uneven in number, their ranks thinned by days of attrition. Medics and corpsmen continue working long after the guns fall silent, treating burns, shrapnel wounds, dehydration, and shock. For the United States Marine Corps, the victory is official, but emotionally unresolved. There are no celebrations, no cheers, only exhaustion and the knowledge that another island waits ahead. On the other side, the Imperial Japanese Army garrison has effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. Most defenders are dead. Others are buried alive in collapsed tunnels or trapped without water or ammunition. Very few surrender. Doctrine, isolation, and circumstance make that outcome rare. Captured documents confirm what Marines already suspected. The defense was never meant to win. It was designed to delay, to bleed, and to demonstrate resolve. In that sense, it succeeded, at a terrible cost. Strategically, the island's capture alters the balance immediately. Airfields are repaired or expanded. Radar installations go up. Naval anchorages become operational within days. What was once a Japanese stronghold now becomes an American launch point. Aircraft begin flying missions farther west almost immediately. Shipping lanes open. The perimeter of Allied control tightens. But none of this erases what the battle has shown. It has confirmed that Japanese island defenses will not collapse under bombardment alone, that underground warfare is now the defining feature of the Pacific Campaign, and that every future landing will demand the same brutal, methodical reduction of fortified terrain. Commanders study reports obsessively. Lessons are formalized. Flamethrower teams are expanded. Tank infantry coordination is refined further. Assault doctrine evolves yet again, shaped by what was learned here. For the Marines who fought, the island becomes a reference point, a place where they learned how a fortress truly dies, a place where survival depended on patience as much as courage, a place that will quietly influence every decision made in the next assault. As preparations begin to move forward toward larger islands and even stronger defenses, the consequences of this victory ripple outward, shaping not just strategy, but expectations. And those consequences are only beginning to unfold. Within days, the island is transformed. Seabees arrive with heavy equipment, carving runways out of ground that had recently been a killing field. Steel planking is laid. Fuel dumps are established.
Radar masts rise where machine guns once dominated the shoreline. The pace is relentless because time matters now more than ever. The island's value becomes immediately apparent. From these airfields, American aircraft can strike deeper into Japanese-held territory. Reconnaissance flights extend the Allied vision westward. Bombers no longer have to operate at the edge of their range. Fighters can escort them farther, stay longer, return safely. At sea, the United States Navy adjusts its posture. What was once a forward assault zone becomes a logistical hub. Repair ships anchor offshore. Convoys reroute with greater confidence. The island, once a threat, is now an asset. But beneath the surface, the cost of taking it continues to surface, literally. As engineers collapse tunnels and clear caves, they uncover the scale of the underground network. Some chambers are deeper and more extensive than expected. Stockpiles of ammunition lie unused. Medical stations are found abandoned mid-treatment. In places, defenders had survived for days after the battle ended, sealed inside without air or water. These discoveries reinforce a hard lesson. Future battles will be even harder. Japanese commanders study the loss and draw their own conclusions. Surviving garrisons elsewhere accelerate tunnel construction. Defenses are pushed deeper inland. Beach fortifications become traps rather than shields. The model tested here is refined, not abandoned. For American forces, this realization carries strategic weight. Every upcoming operation, larger islands, denser populations, stronger defenses, will demand more men, more firepower, and more time. Casualty estimates are adjusted upward. Medical planning expands. Psychological strain becomes a recognized factor, though rarely discussed openly. Among the Marines, the battle becomes part of institutional memory. New units arriving in the Pacific hear about this island not as a story of triumph, but as a warning. Veterans describe what happens when bunkers are assumed destroyed, when silence is trusted, when momentum is lost. The Stronghold's destruction reshapes expectations. No one believes in quick victories anymore. Yet the outcome also strengthens resolve. The system worked. Against one of the most prepared defensive positions encountered so far, the Marines adapted and prevailed, not through speed or surprise, but through integration, discipline, and relentless pressure. It proves that even the most fortified islands can be reduced, provided the cost is accepted. As operations planners look ahead to even more heavily defended objectives, the island fades from headlines, but not from memory. It becomes a template, a grim reference, a confirmation of what the Pacific War has become. A war of positions buried in stone, a war where victory is measured in ground gained at terrible expense, a war where destruction is not dramatic, but inevitable. And as ships begin assembling for the next landing, the question no longer centers on whether the next stronghold can be destroyed, only how much it will demand before it finally breaks.
The destruction of the stronghold marks more than the capture of an island. It marks the moment when modern amphibious warfare reveals its true nature, not as a clash of fleets or a contest of firepower alone, but as a grinding confrontation between human endurance and engineered resistance. What unfolded here was not exceptional, it was instructional. The battle proved that fortresses could no longer be judged by what stood above ground. Power now lived underground, in tunnels, chambers, and hidden firing points that erased traditional ideas of front lines and decisive blows. Victory came not from speed, but from persistence, not from surprise, but from adaptation. For the Marines, the experience hardened both doctrine and mindset.
They learned to distrust silence, to advance without illusion, and to accept that progress would be measured in yards rather than miles. Leadership became decentralized by necessity. Technology became practical rather than symbolic. Fire and steel were tools of survival, not spectacle. For the defenders, the battle reaffirmed a strategy rooted in delay and sacrifice. It demonstrated how long a determined garrison could resist even overwhelming force, and how isolation ultimately rendered that determination irrelevant. Courage alone could not sustain a fortress once its systems collapsed. In the broader sweep of the war, the island's fall tightened the Allied grip on the Pacific. Air routes lengthened, naval dominance deepened. The road toward Japan grew shorter, but no less costly. And for those who fought there, the Stronghold remained a quiet reference point long after the war moved on, a place where abstraction ended and reality took over. A place where the future of warfare became visible in shattered rock and sealed tunnels. Because from this moment forward, every landing would carry the same understanding, that victory in the Pacific would not come quickly, that it would not come cleanly, and that it would only come when endurance outlasted resistance, one stronghold at a time.